The ocean stretches endlessly, a vast, timeless expanse where light fades into darkness and secrets lie hidden beneath the waves. For millennia, sailors whispered of lands swallowed whole, cities glittering beneath the surface, and civilizations whose grandeur rivaled the sun itself. Among these tales, none has captivated the human imagination like Atlantis, a kingdom said to possess wealth, knowledge, and power beyond comprehension. Plato's ancient writings describe an island larger than any known city-state, adorned with palaces of gold, temples of unimaginable beauty, and cities arranged with perfect symmetry. Yet even in its splendor, Atlantis carried a warning. Unchecked ambition and hubris could bring even the greatest civilization to ruin. Some dismiss Atlantis as allegory, a philosophical tale meant to caution against pride. But hints in ancient texts, obscure maps, and anomalous artifacts suggest there may have been more than myth at play. Could a civilization with extraordinary knowledge truly have existed? Could its royal family, the guardians of wisdom and innovation, have left a hidden legacy still echoing through time? Beneath the waves lie structures that defy easy explanation, ruins suggesting planning and technology far beyond what history attributes to the ancient world. Divers report strange anomalies, sonar echoes of streets and walls, and magnetic fields that hint at a past civilization lost to time. Every discovery raises new questions, and every question deepens the mystery. The allure of Atlantis persists even today, inspiring explorers, historians, and dreamers. It is more than a story. It is an invitation to journey into the unknown, to imagine a civilization of unparalleled achievement, and to search for secrets that may have survived the tides of history. Somewhere, deep beneath the ocean, or hidden in the forgotten corners of our world, Atlantis' royal legacy waits, silent yet powerful, ready to be rediscovered. The story of Atlantis begins with a name whispered through time, a name first recorded by the philosopher Plato in the 4th century BCE. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato does more than tell a tale. He constructs a vision of a civilization so advanced, so magnificent, that it eclipses all others known to the ancient world. He speaks of an island nation beyond the Pillars of Hercules, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, with mountains crowned in forests, rivers glistening like silver, and cities arranged with a symmetry that suggests both intelligence and artistry beyond comprehension. Plato's Atlantis is not merely a collection of buildings and streets. It is a society carefully organized under a system of kings, each ruling a portion of the island, bound by law, culture, and a shared pursuit of excellence. In his description, the Atlanteans possess wealth that seems almost mythical. Palaces decorated with gold, silver, and orichalcum, a metal so radiant it outshines the sun at certain angles. They have harbors designed for ships of unimaginable size, and canals connecting the city like veins of life flowing through the island. And yet, for all its grandeur, Atlantis is presented not just as a marvel, but as a warning. Plato describes its people as becoming corrupted by greed and power, their morality decaying even as their knowledge and technology flourish. The story is both an account of human achievement and a cautionary tale, that no matter how great, no civilization is immune to collapse if hubris overtakes virtue. For centuries, scholars debated whether Plato intended Atlantis to be a literal historical record or a philosophical allegory. The allegorical perspective argues that Plato created Atlantis as a narrative device, a symbol of ideal society and moral decay to instruct his contemporaries. Yet, there are elements in his descriptions that suggest more than mere invention. The level of detail, the measurements of walls, the organization of districts, the structure of government, even the flora and fauna, is far too precise to be entirely fictitious. Some researchers believe that Plato may have drawn from a distant memory of a real civilization, perhaps passed down through oral histories, blending truth with philosophical narrative. As Plato's account traveled through time, it captivated minds across generations. Ancient Greek historians, Roman scholars, and later Renaissance thinkers pondered the possibility that such a civilization could have existed. In a world still discovering the limits of the known, Atlantis represented both aspiration and dread. It was a vision of what humans could achieve, yet also a reminder of what could vanish in a single night. The notion of a lost empire, a civilization swallowed by the ocean, stirred imagination and fear alike. The story became a template for future explorations of forgotten worlds, shaping the way humanity thought about history and the unknown. But what if Plato's story was not purely allegorical? What if his words were a coded record, preserving knowledge that was dangerous or forbidden? Alternative theorists argue that the dialogues contain hidden clues pointing to locations, technologies, and even the royal lineage of Atlantis itself. The idea that such information could survive centuries, carefully veiled in metaphor and myth, is tantalizing. Plato may have written with a dual purpose, to educate and to protect. By embedding truths in a tale of philosophy and warning, he could speak of knowledge too potent to reveal openly, ensuring that only those attuned to the clues could uncover them. Even beyond Plato, traces of Atlantis appear in other ancient traditions, often in surprising forms. Egyptian priests reportedly spoke of a land beyond the sea that fell to sudden catastrophe. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets hint at floods and civilizations lost to time, with stories that echo Plato's account in their scale and tragedy. While these mentions are fragmentary and often dismissed by mainstream historians, they suggest a cultural memory that transcended borders, a shared recognition of a civilization that once existed and disappeared. It is as though the memory of Atlantis has seeped into the collective consciousness, shaping myths, legends, and even moral teachings in ways that continue to this day. The idea of a lost civilization with a royal family ruling over a vast and technologically advanced society ignites curiosity like nothing else. Plato describes kings who governed not only with authority but with wisdom, their power rooted in both law and divine sanction. These rulers are presented as custodians of knowledge, guiding the development of their people and safeguarding innovations that may have been far ahead of their time. The question arises, could traces of this governance, this knowledge, survive? Could the legacy of Atlantis royalty have been passed down through secret orders, hidden bloodlines, or encoded symbols preserved in cultures that followed? As we reflect on Plato's writings, it is impossible to separate the allure of Atlantis from the questions it inspires. Was it a dream of perfection that collapsed under human weakness, or a real civilization whose memory has been fractured by time and secrecy? Could the story of Atlantis be the key to understanding the origins of knowledge and power in the ancient world? For those willing to explore the boundaries of history and legend, Plato's dialogues are more than a story. They are an invitation. They invite us to dive into the depths of mystery, to search for connections, and to uncover the possibility that a royal legacy, long hidden beneath the waves, may still echo through the corridors of time. And so, the legend of Atlantis, born from the words of a philosopher who walked the streets of Athens more than 2 millennia ago, continues to challenge our perception of history. It teases us with glimpses of grandeur, whispers of forbidden knowledge, and the faint glimmer of a civilization whose light was extinguished yet whose shadow stretches across the centuries. In the pursuit of Atlantis, we are not merely chasing a myth. We are tracing the outlines of human aspiration, the ambition of kings, and the enduring hope that some truths, no matter how deeply buried, can survive the tides of time. The tale of Atlantis did not end with Plato's dialogues. Instead, it traveled across centuries, evolving with the cultures that carried it. Each era reinterpreted the story, layering new meaning and mystery onto the foundations laid in ancient Greece. To the medieval mind, Atlantis became a symbol of lost wisdom, a cautionary tale wrapped in the fabric of religious and moral teaching. Chroniclers wrote of distant, sunken lands, often blending biblical imagery with the echoes of Plato's story. Some claimed that the waters that swallowed Atlantis were akin to the Great Flood, connecting the tale to the stories of Noah and other deluge myths that permeated human culture. In these retellings, Atlantis was no longer just a historical curiosity. It was a moral lesson, a reminder that human pride could provoke divine wrath, washing away even the mightiest empires. During the Renaissance, the story of Atlantis took on a new dimension, fueled by the era's obsession with exploration, discovery, and human potential. Scholars such as Francis Bacon and Athanasius Kircher contemplated the idea of ancient civilizations lost beneath the waves. Maps began to hint at lands that might exist beyond the known world, and explorers sailed into the unknown, searching for evidence of the fabled island. The human imagination was ignited by the possibility that Plato had not just told a story, but recorded the memory of a real place. Renaissance thinkers and artists embraced Atlantis as a symbol of both human aspiration and vulnerability, depicting its splendor in paintings, etchings, and philosophical treatises. In this period, the idea of Atlantis shifted from moral allegory to a potential historical reality, sparking a fascination that would endure into modern times. As the centuries progressed, the myth of Atlantis continued to intermingle with contemporary understanding of the world. In the 17th and 18th centuries, when Europe was in the midst of scientific revolution and global exploration, Atlantis was debated in academic circles, not merely as a story, but as a question to be solved. Some argued that Plato's island could be found in the Atlantic Ocean, hidden by shifting continents or submerged by cataclysmic floods. Others speculated that it had lain in the Mediterranean, a victim of tectonic upheaval. Maps, records, and accounts of explorers were scrutinized for clues, and the mystery of Atlantis became a puzzle inviting serious attention from philosophers, scientists, and adventurers alike. Even in skepticism, the allure of the island persisted, drawing attention to the tension between human knowledge and the mysteries that lay just beyond the horizon. In the 19th century, the story of Atlantis entered a new phase, fueled by the rise of archaeology and the fascination with ancient civilizations. Explorers such as Ignatius Donnelly popularized the idea that Atlantis was not myth, but the cradle of all human civilization. In his controversial works, he argued that the ancient cultures of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Americas bore the unmistakable marks of Atlantean influence. According to these theories, Atlantis was a center of knowledge, a civilization whose technology, governance, and wisdom spread across the globe before it was swallowed by the sea. Donnelly's writings captured the imagination of the public and academic circles alike, introducing the idea that Atlantis' royal lineage may have survived in hidden forms, influencing subsequent civilizations in subtle, almost invisible ways. Even as skepticism grew in mainstream history, the story of Atlantis continued to thrive in esoteric and mystical traditions. Occultists, secret societies, and visionaries incorporated Atlantis into their cosmologies, portraying it as a repository of lost spiritual knowledge, advanced science, and powerful energy sources. In these interpretations, the fall of Atlantis was not merely a historical event, but a turning point in humanity's development. A civilization whose wisdom, though nearly erased, could be accessed through symbols, rituals, and the study of ancient texts. For those who looked beyond conventional history, Atlantis became a living myth, a bridge connecting human ambition with the potential for enlightenment and hidden power. Throughout these eras, one theme remained consistent: Atlantis was always linked to grandeur, mystery, and the idea of a civilization that transcended ordinary human limits. Its royal lineage, as described by Plato, became a point of fascination. Some believed that the kings of Atlantis were not just rulers, but custodians of a knowledge too dangerous to share openly. Legends whispered that members of this elite class may have escaped the island's destruction, carrying with them secrets that would later resurface in mysterious societies and ancient traditions. Each retelling, whether in scholarly treatises, mystical texts, or popular imagination, reinforced the notion that Atlantis was more than a place. It was an idea, a mirror reflecting both the highest aspirations and the darkest hubris of humanity. The evolution of Atlantis through history also reflects humanity's own changing perception of the unknown. In ancient Greece, it was a philosophical warning. In the Middle Ages, it was a moral allegory. During the Renaissance, it became a challenge for explorers and thinkers. And in modern times, it has become a puzzle blending archaeology, mythology, and conspiracy. Every era has left its mark, adding layers to the narrative and complicating the search for truth. What survives in these retellings is a compelling sense of possibility, that Atlantis was not merely a product of imagination, but a memory of something real, something so extraordinary that even fragmented accounts could ignite wonder across millennia. By tracing the story of Atlantis through time, we begin to see the contours of a civilization whose presence is felt even in absence. Its influence is woven into myths, philosophies, and legends that have shaped the way humans conceive of history, power, and knowledge. And perhaps most intriguingly, the persistent fascination with Atlantis hints at a hidden truth, that somewhere beneath the waves or in the shadows of history, a legacy of wisdom, authority, and royal heritage continues to echo, waiting to be rediscovered by those bold enough to look beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. Maps have long been humanity's attempt to impose order on the vast, uncharted spaces of the world. They are not merely tools of navigation. They are records of knowledge, belief, and imagination. Throughout history, some maps have hinted at lands that do not appear on any modern chart, territories submerged, forgotten, or deliberately erased from collective memory. Among these elusive representations, a few have ignited fascination because they seem to point to the lost island of Atlantis. These forbidden maps, drawn by cartographers both brilliant and mysterious, suggest that the story Plato told may have had a basis in observable geography, even if hidden beneath centuries of skepticism and secrecy. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer, is one of the most enigmatic examples. It depicts the coastlines of Africa, South America, and even hints of Antarctica with a precision that astounds modern scholars. Some researchers argue that certain sections of the map, particularly those showing regions supposedly covered by ice thousands of years ago, could not have been drawn without advanced knowledge or access to ancient sources now lost. While mainstream historians often dismiss these claims, alternative theories suggest that maps like this one may preserve traces of Atlantean exploration or knowledge. Perhaps the royal lineage of Atlantis, aware of impending catastrophe, encoded their discoveries in ways that could survive the ravages of time, leaving cryptic guides for those capable of deciphering them. Another fascinating example is the Orontius Phineas map of 1531, a French depiction of the world that also seems to show a detailed, ice-free representation of Antarctica. The precision of the continent's coastline, which would not be officially discovered and mapped until centuries later, has puzzled historians. Could this reflect knowledge passed down from a civilization capable of advanced cartography, one whose roots trace back to Atlantis? Some theorists posit that survivors of the cataclysm carried navigational knowledge across generations, subtly influencing explorers and cartographers in a way that left faint but enduring imprints on maps. These charts, often dismissed as curiosities, may in fact be fragments of a hidden legacy, the footprints of an empire thought to have vanished beneath the waves. Beyond the maps themselves, there are recurring symbols and anomalies that suggest intentional encoding. Circles, concentric patterns, and geometrically precise arrangements echo the descriptions of Atlantis' central city found in Plato's writings. These designs may represent more than artistry. They could be deliberate hints pointing to locations, resources, or knowledge that the world was not yet ready to embrace. For centuries, cartographers and scholars who came across these anomalies often kept their interpretations to themselves, fearing ridicule or persecution, and in doing so, contributed to a culture of suppression around the subject. The notion that someone, somewhere, might still hold the key to unlocking these secrets adds a layer of suspense that continues to intrigue modern explorers. Maps alone, however, do not tell the full story. They are complemented by obscure texts, navigational manuals, and even religious documents that hint at lands beyond the reach of conventional observation. Some of these records suggest that Atlantis was not merely an island, but a hub of trade, innovation, and wisdom that extended its influence far beyond its shores. Ancient mariners may have carried knowledge of currents, magnetic anomalies, and hidden passages that were deliberately coded into charts to preserve the civilization's legacy. This intertwining of geography, science, and secrecy hints at a society that understood both the world and the fragility of its own place within it. The tension between what is recorded and what is suppressed is palpable. Mainstream history often treats these maps as curiosities or errors, dismissing the possibility that they reflect knowledge lost with Atlantis. Yet, when viewed through the lens of alternative history and esoteric speculation, the patterns are striking. They suggest deliberate concealment, as though the royal families of Atlantis sought to preserve their discoveries for posterity while protecting them from those who might misuse them. In this sense, maps become more than navigational tools. They are time capsules, subtle whispers from a vanished civilization, waiting to be interpreted by those with the patience and insight to read them. Even the act of hiding information itself carries a message. Across centuries, explorers and scholars have repeatedly stumbled upon hints of lost lands, only to encounter obstacles, disappearing manuscripts, destroyed evidence, or deliberate obfuscation by institutions wary of challenging established narratives. The story of Atlantis is thus intertwined with a broader tale of suppression, a struggle between revelation and concealment. The maps, both accurate and enigmatic, serve as proof that someone, somewhere, had a profound understanding of the world, a knowledge sophisticated enough to survive millennia, even if shrouded in mystery. This dynamic between revelation and secrecy mirrors the very story of Atlantis. Just as the civilization was said to possess incredible knowledge and technology, so too does the historical record retain subtle hints that challenge our understanding of the past. What is truly astonishing is how consistent these references remain across cultures and epochs. The idea of a lost civilization, advanced beyond contemporary societies, appears not just in Greek philosophy, but in Egyptian accounts, Mesoamerican myths, and obscure European manuscripts. The maps are the tangible expression of this enduring memory, a visual record of a truth that has long been concealed. For those willing to explore these clues, the maps offer more than geography, they offer narrative. They hint at the grandeur of a society whose rulers, perhaps aware of impending doom, sought to encode their achievements and wisdom in a way that could outlast the tides of history. Every coastline, every anomaly, every arcane symbol becomes a potential breadcrumb leading back to Atlantis' royal legacy. And as modern technology allows us to analyze maps with unprecedented precision, new patterns and possibilities continue to emerge, suggesting that the ocean still guards secrets waiting to be uncovered. In contemplating these maps, one begins to realize that Atlantis was never merely a myth of the past. It is a living puzzle, a dialogue across centuries, connecting philosophers, explorers, and dreamers in a shared quest for knowledge. Each line drawn on parchment, each anomalous shape, and each suppressed manuscript invites us to consider that the royal families of Atlantis may have survived in ways we cannot yet comprehend, preserving wisdom and influence through subtle, coded transmissions. In this light, the study of maps becomes not just an academic exercise, but a journey into the very heart of mystery, a pursuit that blurs the boundary between legend and reality and beckons the imagination toward truths hidden beneath the waves and within the shadows of history. In Plato's account, the kings of Atlantis were more than rulers. They were custodians of civilization that blended unparalleled knowledge, wealth, and moral responsibility. Each king governed a portion of the island, yet all were bound together by a shared duty to maintain balance and harmony across the realm. Their authority was not derived solely from force, but from wisdom and divine sanction, a principle suggesting that leadership in Atlantis was as much about stewardship of knowledge as it was about governance. The notion of royal bloodlines, carefully maintained and intertwined with the fate of the civilization itself, is a recurring theme in both ancient texts and the speculative accounts of modern researchers. This lineage, some argue, may have survived the cataclysm, carrying with it the secrets of Atlantis' power. The structure of Atlantean royalty, as described by Plato, hints at a society that valued both intellect and strategy. The central kings ruled from the heart of the island, a capital city surrounded by concentric rings of water and land, designed not only for defense, but as a symbol of order and divine geometry. Within these palaces, the kings were said to study astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, and spiritual philosophy. Their education was holistic, merging practical governance with understanding of natural law and the cosmos. The very design of their cities suggests a culture in which the ruling class saw themselves as guardians of knowledge, and perhaps even as intermediaries between humanity and higher forces. It is within this framework that the notion of a surviving royal lineage becomes particularly compelling. Throughout history, researchers and mystics have speculated that this lineage did not vanish with the destruction of the island. Some suggest that surviving members of the royal family fled to distant lands, bringing with them both bloodlines and esoteric knowledge. Legends place these survivors in regions as diverse as the Mediterranean, North Africa, and even the Americas, leaving subtle but significant imprints on local traditions, religious practices, and even governance. If these claims are true, then the royal legacy of Atlantis is not lost to time. It lives on in the hidden architecture of culture, in the rituals of secret societies, and in myths passed down through generations. Evidence of such influence is often subtle, appearing in symbolic motifs, genealogical records, or even folklore. For instance, some scholars have noted uncanny similarities between Atlantean symbols described in Plato's dialogues and those used by later secret societies, including the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons. These groups, steeped in allegory and coded knowledge, may have preserved fragments of Atlantean wisdom, encoding them into rituals, architecture, and texts. The suggestion is provocative, that a civilization thought to have disappeared beneath the waves may have survived not in structures, but in knowledge carefully guarded and transmitted through the centuries by a select few. The idea of a preserved royal bloodline is further supported by accounts of dynastic continuity in various ancient cultures. Some alternative historians propose that European monarchies, and perhaps other ruling families around the world, carry genetic or symbolic traces of Atlantean heritage. These theories, though controversial, point to a fascination with the intersection of power, knowledge, and bloodline, a concept central to the mystique of Atlantis. If the kings of Atlantis were indeed custodians of extraordinary knowledge, it would make sense that descendants would seek to protect and perpetuate that wisdom, ensuring that it survived even if the civilization itself was obliterated. One of the most compelling aspects of this idea is the concept of knowledge inheritance. In Atlantis, the kings were not merely rulers by chance. They were trained and educated to maintain a lineage of wisdom. Skills in engineering, astronomy, governance, and spiritual insight were passed down from one generation to the next, forming a continuous thread of intellectual and cultural preservation. This practice suggests that the collapse of the physical city might not have meant the complete disappearance of its people or ideas. Knowledge, once encoded in the minds and practices of those who survived, could outlast walls, harbors, and temples. In this sense, the royal family of Atlantis becomes not just a historical curiosity, but a potential key to understanding the survival of ancient wisdom. There are tantalizing hints in historical records and mythologies that such continuity may have occurred. Egyptian priests, for example, spoke of lands and rulers lost to the waters, yet they preserved knowledge of celestial cycles and advanced architecture, which some argue could have been influenced by Atlantean survivors. Similarly, some Mesoamerican traditions describe gods and kings who descended from distant, sunken lands, bringing with them knowledge of agriculture, mathematics, and governance. These parallels are speculative, yet the recurring pattern across continents suggests the possibility of a thread connecting Atlantis' royal lineage to later civilizations. In addition to geography and genealogy, the philosophical and spiritual elements of Atlantean royalty are significant. Plato describes the kings as not only rulers, but moral exemplars, charged with guiding society toward harmony and balance. This dual emphasis on power and wisdom resonates with later mystical traditions, which often link leadership with enlightenment. Some esoteric researchers speculate that the descendants of Atlantis' royal line may have influenced the formation of secret societies and mystical orders, preserving principles of governance, science, and spirituality under the veil of ritual. Through these networks, fragments of Atlantean knowledge may have been safeguarded for millennia, awaiting discovery by those prepared to interpret their codes. The allure of a surviving royal lineage lies not only in the mystery itself, but in what it implies about human potential. If knowledge and wisdom can survive catastrophe through bloodlines and secret transmission, then the story of Atlantis transforms from tragedy into a narrative of endurance. The kings of Atlantis were more than rulers. They were stewards of civilization, custodians of technology and morality, and architects of a legacy that may extend far beyond the island itself. To trace their lineage is to follow a thread of human aspiration, a hidden path through history that intertwines ambition, intellect, and survival. In contemplating the possibility of Atlantis' royal heritage enduring across time, one cannot ignore the tension between revelation and concealment. Mainstream history has often dismissed these claims as fantasy, yet the consistency of certain motifs, genealogical hints, and symbolic parallels across cultures is difficult to ignore. The story of the kings, their knowledge, and their survival invites us to consider the possibility that history is more than what is written in textbooks. It suggests that some truths are deliberately hidden, preserved through careful stewardship, and encoded in ways that require patience, insight, and courage to uncover. Ultimately, the royal lineage of Atlantis, whether surviving in blood, knowledge, or myth, represents the enduring human fascination with civilization at its peak. It reminds us that the pursuit of wisdom and the preservation of knowledge are timeless endeavors, and that the legacies of the past may survive in ways far more subtle and powerful than the remains of buildings or cities. To follow the trail of Atlantean royalty is to step into a world where myth and history blur, where the whispers of the past may still guide the curious, and where the promise of hidden wisdom awaits those bold enough to seek it. Atlantis was said to possess technologies and innovations that would astound even the most advanced civilizations of later centuries. Plato's accounts hint at architectural marvels, irrigation systems, and machinery that seem almost impossibly sophisticated for a society that existed thousands of years ago. Scholars and alternative theorists alike have speculated that the Atlanteans had mastered the manipulation of natural forces in ways we are only beginning to understand today. They describe enormous temples built with precision that allowed them to withstand earthquakes, massive harbors designed for colossal vessels, and energy sources that harnessed the elements themselves. These were not simply utilitarian achievements. They were expressions of a civilization whose knowledge of engineering, mathematics, and natural law exceeded anything documented elsewhere in antiquity. One of the most intriguing suggestions concerns Atlantean energy. Some theorists argue that the island's inhabitants may have discovered methods to generate power from crystals, magnetic fields, or water currents, effectively creating a form of energy that rivaled, or even surpassed, modern technology. Ancient ruins and artifacts hint at knowledge of materials and forces that remain mysterious to contemporary scientists. For example, concentric rings described in Plato's city layout, with alternating layers of water and land, could have served both as defensive structures and as conduits for some form of energy distribution. The possibility that such technologies were not only practical but deliberately concealed adds a layer of tension, implying that the fall of Atlantis may have been as much about the suppression of knowledge as it was about the destruction of a people. The engineering feats of Atlantis, according to some interpretations, were deeply tied to the knowledge of its royal lineage. Kings and scholars reportedly worked together to advance understanding in astronomy, metallurgy, and hydraulics. The construction of bridges, canals, and waterways that connected the city to the sea is described with extraordinary precision, suggesting the application of principles that would not be seen again for thousands of years. Such infrastructure indicates not only practical intelligence, but a profound comprehension of nature itself, as if the Atlanteans understood the underlying forces that govern the physical world. In this sense, their technology was inseparable from their philosophy: to control the environment responsibly, to harness its power without destroying it, and to integrate wisdom into every facet of civic life. Metallurgy is another area where the Atlanteans are said to have excelled. Plato mentions orichalcum, a precious metal more valuable than gold, which adorned the walls and temples of the city. The exact nature of this metal has long been debated, with some researchers suggesting it may have been an alloy with unique conductive or energetic properties. Its rarity and its use in sacred and governmental structures hint at both technological sophistication and symbolic importance, suggesting that Atlantean rulers understood the connection between material mastery and spiritual or societal power. Every tool, ornament, and artifact may have been designed to harness and channel energy, reflecting a civilization in which science and mysticism were inseparably intertwined. The sudden disappearance of Atlantis raises questions not only about the fate of its people, but also about what became of this advanced knowledge. If the civilization was as technologically sophisticated as described, then the loss would be profound, not only for the inhabitants but for humanity as a whole. Some theorists propose that portions of Atlantean technology may have survived through the secret preservation of knowledge by royal survivors. Others suggest that certain innovations could have been encoded in myths, symbols, or architectural principles passed down through generations. The deliberate concealment of such knowledge, whether due to fear, prudence, or foresight, contributes to the enduring aura of mystery surrounding Atlantis. Archaeologists and explorers occasionally uncover anomalies that hint at technologies lost to the ages. Sunken structures, unusual stonework, and artifacts that defy conventional explanation provoke speculation about Atlantean engineering. Some sunken platforms and symmetrical ruins suggest deliberate planning that surpasses what was thought possible for ancient societies. These discoveries, however, are often met with skepticism or dismissed by mainstream science, reinforcing the idea that some truths may be deliberately obscured, hidden from view until the right moment or the right observer comes along to interpret them. The interplay between knowledge and power is central to understanding Atlantean technology. The kings of Atlantis reportedly did not merely rule. They stewarded innovations that could alter the balance of civilization. Machinery, tools, and architectural designs may have been both practical and symbolic, demonstrating the authority and wisdom of the rulers while serving the needs of the people. In this context, technology becomes a form of cultural memory, a testament to the sophistication and ambition of a civilization now lost to the waves, but potentially preserved in fragments, hints, and coded knowledge waiting to be discovered. Some modern theorists even speculate that remnants of Atlantean technology could have influenced subsequent civilizations. Innovations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Americas, particularly in architecture, astronomy, and hydraulics, sometimes appear to echo descriptions of Atlantean practices. While mainstream historians attribute these similarities to independent development, others argue for a line of transmission, suggesting that royal survivors of Atlantis may have shared or ceded knowledge across distant lands. This notion positions Atlantis not as an isolated curiosity, but as a foundational civilization whose technological legacy subtly shaped the course of human history. Ultimately, the story of Atlantean technology is inseparable from the larger mystery of the civilization itself. It is a tale of knowledge both extraordinary and perilous, of innovations that could advance or destroy, and of a royal lineage entrusted with the guardianship of that knowledge. The tension between revelation and suppression, between discovery and concealment, lies at the heart of the Atlantis narrative. It is this tension that continues to captivate our imagination. The possibility that beneath the waves, or hidden in manuscripts and myths, there exists a record of a civilization whose technological brilliance rivals or even surpasses our own. In contemplating these lost technologies, we are drawn not only to the mechanics of construction or the properties of materials, but to the broader question of human potential. Atlantis challenges us to consider what might be possible if knowledge were preserved, applied wisely, and integrated with both moral and spiritual insight. It invites reflection on the fragility of civilization, the stewardship of power, and the consequences of hubris. And perhaps most compellingly, it suggests that some innovations, hidden, encoded, or lost, might still await rediscovery, a silent legacy of ingenuity lying beneath the waves, ready to illuminate the depths of human history and imagination. The fall of Atlantis is perhaps the most haunting and enduring element of its story, a cataclysm that has fascinated historians, mystics, and storytellers for millennia. Plato describes the sudden destruction of the island, a civilization of extraordinary knowledge and wealth swallowed by the sea in a single night. Earthquakes shook the land, mountains crumbled, and tidal waves engulfed cities, reducing palaces, temples, and harbors to ruins beneath the waves. The narrative conveys not only physical devastation, but moral and spiritual decay, a civilization brought down by hubris, greed, and the misuse of its immense power. This cataclysm serves as both a warning and a mystery. What precisely caused such a sudden and total annihilation? Modern theorists and scientists have proposed a variety of explanations, each adding new layers of intrigue. Some suggest natural cataclysms, massive volcanic eruptions, tectonic shifts, or meteor impacts, as plausible causes for a sudden submergence. The region beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where Plato located Atlantis, is geologically active, with evidence of seismic activity and ancient tsunamis that could have reshaped coastlines dramatically. If Atlantis truly existed in such a volatile zone, it is conceivable that a natural disaster of unprecedented scale could have destroyed the island and left little trace behind. Yet even in the face of science, the story retains its enigmatic power. No fully verified remains have been conclusively linked to the island, leaving open the question of whether nature alone is sufficient to explain its disappearance. Other interpretations move beyond geology into more speculative territory, suggesting that the Atlanteans themselves may have played a role in their downfall. Some esoteric theories propose that their technological advancements, perhaps their mastery of energy or crystal-based power, were misused or destabilized, inadvertently triggering catastrophic events. In this framework, the fall of Atlantis is not just a tale of nature's fury, but a cautionary narrative about the limits of knowledge and the dangers of wielding power without wisdom. The story of the kings and their responsibility to safeguard civilization resonates even more profoundly when considered alongside the possibility that their own creations may have hastened the end of their world. The human dimension of the catastrophe is equally compelling. Families, communities, and the royal lineage itself may have faced impossible choices in the final hours. Plato hints that some of the nobility and knowledge keepers may have survived, escaping to distant lands with fragments of wisdom, technology, and governance. These survivors, if they existed, could have carried forward a hidden legacy, ensuring that the influence of Atlantis endured even as the physical city was lost. This raises tantalizing questions. Which aspects of the civilization survived? Were its secrets preserved in distant cultures, encoded in symbols, rituals, or myths? And most importantly, could fragments of Atlantean knowledge still exist today, waiting to be uncovered by those attuned to the subtle clues left behind? Ancient texts beyond Plato's writings provide intriguing echoes of such a catastrophe. Egyptian priests reportedly spoke of floods and lost lands, preserving knowledge of astronomical cycles and advanced architecture long after the supposed fall of Atlantis. In Mesopotamian and Mesoamerican traditions, there are references to gods and kings descending from sunken lands, imparting knowledge to human societies. While skeptics often dismiss these parallels as coincidental or allegorical, the consistency of these narratives across widely separated cultures suggests the possibility of a shared memory of cataclysmic events. These stories, when read alongside geological and archaeological evidence, create a mosaic of possibility that both enthralls and confounds those who search for truth beneath legend. The imagery of a civilization vanishing beneath the waves is particularly striking in its cinematic resonance. Cities once alive with commerce, art, and innovation reduced to silent ruins. Canals and harbors filled with silt and coral. Palaces standing as ghostly skeletons of stone, and the echoes of a royal lineage that may have walked the earth again, carrying with them the wisdom and tragedy of a lost world. This vision captures not only the imagination, but a profound sense of impermanence. The idea that even the mightiest civilizations are vulnerable to forces beyond their control, whether natural, human, or cosmic. It is a story of grandeur and fragility intertwined, and it is precisely this duality that has kept the legend of Atlantis alive across the centuries. Yet, amid the destruction, there is a persistent undercurrent of survival and hope. Some theorists posit that the Atlantean elites may have had contingency plans, storing knowledge in coded texts, symbols, or distant settlements. Others suggest that survivors merged with emerging civilizations, subtly influencing their development and guiding humanity's progress in ways hidden from conventional historical records. This idea positions the fall of Atlantis not as a simple end, but as a transition, an event that erased the physical markers of a civilization while allowing the essence of its wisdom and leadership to endure. In this sense, the cataclysm becomes both a finality and a beginning, a dramatic pivot point in the broader narrative of human history. The fall of Atlantis also resonates metaphorically, offering lessons about power, hubris, and stewardship. A civilization capable of immense technological achievement and societal organization nonetheless fell due to moral corruption and the mismanagement of its gifts. Plato's story underscores that knowledge and power, no matter how advanced, must be tempered with ethics and responsibility. This theme echoes through history in various forms, reminding us that even today, societies must navigate the delicate balance between ambition, morality, and the potential consequences of misused knowledge. Ultimately, the cataclysm of Atlantis is both a narrative of awe-inspiring destruction and a repository of questions that continue to challenge and intrigue. Its suddenness, its scale, and its aftermath inspire speculation about survival, suppression, and hidden legacy. The fall of the island is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a lens through which we examine human ambition, the fragility of civilization, and the potential for knowledge to endure in unexpected ways. The waves that swallowed Atlantis may have concealed the city, but they also may have preserved a story, a legacy of kings, wisdom, and innovation that whispers across time, waiting for those willing to listen to the echoes from beneath the deep. Long after the cataclysm that supposedly swallowed Atlantis, whispers of its civilization continued to surface, not only in texts and myths, but in tangible artifacts scattered across the world. These relics, often enigmatic and difficult to place in conventional archaeological frameworks, tantalize researchers with the possibility that Atlantis' presence extended far beyond the boundaries of Plato's account. Sunken structures in the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, and even off the coast of Japan hint at the existence of civilizations that were remarkably advanced for their time. Some of these ruins exhibit geometric precision and monumental scale, suggesting engineering knowledge that modern science struggles to fully explain. The patterns and alignments of these structures often correspond with celestial markers, reinforcing the idea that Atlantean culture was deeply intertwined with astronomy and cosmic understanding. Among the most famous examples are underwater formations like those off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas. The so-called Bimini Road consists of massive stone blocks arranged in a pattern that appears deliberate, not random. While mainstream science often attributes such formations to natural geological processes, alternative theorists argue that the alignment and scale of these stones indicate human intervention, perhaps the remnants of Atlantean harbors or roadways. The possibility that these stones are fragments of a lost civilization adds an electrifying tension. Here, in plain view beneath the waves, might lie evidence of Atlantis' technological prowess, a silent record of the ingenuity that once thrived on a vanished island. Other artifacts take the form of intricately carved objects, tools, or ceremonial items whose purpose is not immediately clear. Some appear to be made of metals or alloys not commonly associated with ancient technology, hinting at a level of metallurgical sophistication far ahead of known civilizations. These pieces, whether found in archaeological digs, submerged sites, or private collections, fuel speculation that Atlantis knowledge may have survived in the hands of survivors or through trade with other cultures. Every unusual artifact becomes a tantalizing breadcrumb, suggesting that the legacy of Atlantean innovation persists, hidden in plain sight and often dismissed by mainstream scholarship. Even more intriguing are symbolic and architectural echoes that appear across distant civilizations. The concentric city plans described by Plato, alternating rings of land and water, central temples, and fortified zones, resonate with structures found in ancient cultures from the Mediterranean to the Americas. Some researchers suggest that the geometric precision, astronomical alignment, and monumental scale of these constructions indicate a shared source of knowledge, potentially rooted in the teachings or influence of Atlantean survivors. This pattern hints at the possibility that Atlantis' royal family, its engineers, and its scholars carried fragments of their civilization's wisdom into other parts of the world, subtly shaping the trajectory of human history, while remaining hidden beneath the surface of conventional records. Artifacts and ruins are not the only evidence. There are also traces in literature, iconography, and ritual practice that suggest Atlantean influence. Mesoamerican glyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and even European alchemical symbols sometimes display motifs that echo descriptions of Atlantean culture. These similarities, though often dismissed as coincidence, may reflect the transmission of knowledge preserved by survivors or secret societies descended from the Atlantean elite. The continuity of certain symbols, spirals, concentric circles, sun emblems, and sacred geometries across disparate cultures reinforces the idea of a hidden legacy, a subtle yet enduring imprint of a civilization that refused to vanish entirely. The process of discovery is often shadowed by controversy and suppression. Artifacts that could hint at Atlantean origins have occasionally been withheld from public study, misidentified, or destroyed. Scholars who challenge mainstream narratives risk professional ridicule, while private collectors sometimes keep enigmatic items out of academic circulation. This tension between revelation and concealment mirrors the very story of Atlantis itself, a civilization of extraordinary knowledge whose survival depended on discretion and protection. The notion that some aspects of Atlantean technology and culture were deliberately hidden for millennia adds a layer of intrigue, transforming each artifact into more than a relic. It becomes a potential key to unlocking ancient wisdom. Across the globe, researchers continue to identify sites that defy conventional categorization. In the Mediterranean, submerged structures near Crete and Santorini hint at pre-Minoan civilizations with advanced architectural capabilities. In Japan, sunken stone formations raise questions about ancient maritime knowledge and construction methods. Even in the Americas, ruins such as the pyramids of Teotihuacan and the ceremonial platforms of the Maya sometimes exhibit precision and astronomical alignment that suggest a deeper understanding of geometry and cosmic cycles. While each site has its skeptics, taken together, they paint a tantalizing picture. Fragments of a civilization whose technological and cultural achievements may have influenced the development of societies worldwide. Perhaps most compelling are the subtle hints linking these artifacts to the royal lineage of Atlantis. Plato describes kings not only as rulers, but as guardians of knowledge and innovation. It is conceivable that some relics were intentionally preserved or encoded to survive in secret, their design and construction reflecting principles taught only to the elite. These objects, tools, architectural layouts, ceremonial items, and symbolic carvings could represent a continuity of Atlantean culture, a silent testament to the civilization's achievements and the foresight of its leaders. Each artifact is a puzzle piece, a fragment of a larger story that challenges our understanding of human history and invites us to consider the possibility that the king's legacy endured far longer than their island. Ultimately, the search for Atlantean artifacts is a journey into both history and imagination. It requires interpreting subtle clues, reading between lines, and considering the possibility that some of humanity's earliest technological and cultural advances were inherited from a civilization lost beneath the waves. Each discovery, each anomaly, whether embraced by mainstream scholarship or shrouded in controversy, reinforces the allure of Atlantis. These relics are more than stones, metals, or carvings. They are echoes of a civilization that mastered knowledge, guided by its royal lineage, and perhaps left a legacy that still resonates in hidden corners of our world. The artifacts of Atlantis remind us that history is never fully complete and that the line between myth and reality is often thinner than we imagine. They compel us to ask questions. What did the kings of Atlantis truly know? How far did their influence spread? And most hauntingly, what might still lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered in the depths of the oceans or in the forgotten corners of human culture? In searching for these artifacts, we are not only seeking objects of the past, we're seeking to connect with a civilization whose ambition, ingenuity, and wisdom continue to captivate the human imagination, whispering across millennia and inviting us to uncover the hidden legacy beneath the waves. In every age of human history, there are those who claim to guard memories far older than their civilizations, fragments of knowledge preserved like glowing embers carried through the long night of time. These groups, priests, prophets, hermetic sages, and later, secret societies, speak of an era before memory, before the calendars turned, before even the first dynasties rose. Their teachings often allude to a place of radiant kings, a lost island, of vanished people who possessed not only advanced wisdom, but the responsibility to preserve it. While mainstream history sees these stories as allegory, the deeper traditions insist they are surviving echoes of an actual royal lineage from a drowned world, the rulers of Atlantis. Across cultures, in temples and mystery schools separated by oceans and millennia, we find a striking pattern. Initiates were told that their teachings did not originate in the civilizations they served. Rather, they were custodians of something older, teachings rescued from a great catastrophe. This idea appears in Egyptian priestly texts, in Sumerian temple lore, in the Orphic hymns of Greece, and even in the esoteric undercurrents of early Christianity. The guardians of this hidden knowledge often refer to themselves as keepers of the deep memory, a title suggesting not only wisdom but lineage, heritage, and continuity. In the Greek mysteries, particularly the Eleusinian rites, initiates learned a story of a pre-human age of harmony and divine rule. Behind the metaphor, some scholars of esoteric tradition believe the rites encoded a historical trauma, the fall of an advanced culture whose survivors carried both their knowledge and their bloodlines into the lands where new civilizations would emerge. The Eleusinian priesthood spoke of an island of the dawn, whose kings were beloved of the gods but punished by the sea. When Plato later described Atlantis, his account echoed older mystery teachings rather than inventing something new. Egypt's priestly caste took this idea even further. The House of Life, their ancient institution of knowledge, told initiates that the first kings of Egypt, long before the pharaohs, came from a land devastated by water. These beings, called the Shemshor, or followers of Horus, were said to have brought with them the arts of writing, astronomy, healing, and sacred architecture. Some Egyptologists dismissed the Shemshor as mythic ancestors. Yet in esoteric tradition, they are viewed as the last bearers of Atlantean royal knowledge, integrating into the Nile Valley after fleeing their sinking homeland. Certain rituals, such as the Sed festival and the coronation rites of the pharaohs, contain symbols that appear far older than Egypt itself, hinting at a transplanted royal tradition. In Judaic mystical literature, particularly the Kabbalistic interpretations of early Genesis, there are cryptic references to pre-Adamite kings and civilizations destroyed before the biblical flood. These texts propose that certain prophetic lineages, most notably the Essenes, held fragments of wisdom from this earlier world. The Essene teachings place great emphasis on cycles of destruction and renewal, on sacred knowledge encoded in stars and stones, and on the responsibility of specific families to preserve this wisdom until a future age of awakening, whether metaphorical or historical. The persistent theme is the survival of a chosen lineage charged with carrying the memory of a lost civilization. As the centuries passed and empires rose and fell, These threads of ancient memory wove themselves into the fabric of secret societies. The Pythagoreans, for instance, regarded their mathematical wisdom not as innovation, but as rediscovery. Knowledge they claimed originated from an earlier, more enlightened race. Their emblematic use of the tetractys, a triangular symbol combining geometry with divine proportion, mirrors Atlantean iconography described in esoteric texts. Pythagoras himself traveled through Egypt and Babylon, seeking the hidden teachings passed down by the priesthoods, teachings said to have come from the survivors of Atlantis. Hermeticism, too, draws its roots from this deeper well. The Corpus Hermeticum, attributed to the semi-divine figure Hermes Trismegistus, speaks repeatedly of a primordial kingdom destroyed by a great flood. It describes a class of priest-kings who preserved sacred sciences aboard ships and in remote sanctuaries as the waters rose. Hermetic symbolism, especially the merging of divine and earthly kingship, strongly parallels the hierarchical structure of Atlantis described by Plato and echoed in Egyptian myth. The early Christian mystics, especially those influenced by Gnostic thought, carried similar concepts forward. They believed that certain teachings of Jesus were meant exclusively for initiates capable of understanding ancient, pre-flood wisdom. These ideas circulated quietly, surviving through monastic orders and hidden gospels. Gnostic texts refer to a kingdom beneath the waters and a lineage chosen to carry the spark of divine knowledge into the post-flood world. By the medieval era, this current of ancient memory flowed into the secretive traditions of the Knights Templar and later the Rosicrucians. Both groups claimed possession of texts and artifacts far older than the Church or the kingdoms of Europe. They spoke of a forgotten age of enlightened kings and a catastrophic deluge that forced the survivors to hide their wisdom in architecture, symbols, and coded manuscripts. Whether these claims were literal or symbolic is debated, but their rituals and emblems reveal a remarkable consistency with older myths of Atlantean sovereignty, especially the emphasis on sacred geometry, the sanctity of the bloodline, and the belief that history moves in cycles of rise, fall, and rebirth. Even in the Renaissance, when science and mysticism intertwined, influential thinkers like Francis Bacon wrote allegories about a lost island kingdom ruled by wise philosopher kings who preserved universal knowledge through cataclysms. Bacon's New Atlantis is often seen as fiction, yet those familiar with esoteric tradition recognize it as an encoded transmission of older stories about a real civilization that once existed and whose legacy continued through hidden lineages. Across all these traditions runs a single unbroken theme. Somewhere in humanity's distant past, there was a royal class entrusted not merely with political power, but with cosmic responsibility. They were guardians of astronomical cycles, masters of sacred architecture, preservers of metaphysical laws. When their civilization fell, whether by divine judgment, natural disaster, or internal corruption, the responsibility of safeguarding their knowledge fell to priesthoods, prophets, and secret brotherhoods scattered across the world. These groups never openly declared themselves heirs to Atlantean royalty. Such claims would have invited persecution or disbelief. Instead, they encoded their legacy in symbols: serpents eating their tails, suns rising over water, winged crowns, tridents, spirals, and geometric ratios. They passed their teachings through whispers and manuscripts, through ritual dramas performed in torchlit chambers, through architecture aligned with stars. They became mirrors reflecting the memory of a forgotten age. Today, when we trace the paths of these ancient custodians, from Egyptian priests to Greek philosophers, from Essene scribes to Hermetic magi, from Templars to Rosicrucians, we encounter the same quiet suggestion that beneath the surface of recorded history lies a much older lineage carrying fragments of a lost royal order. They are the remnants of a civilization submerged not only by water, but by time, secrecy, and deliberate forgetting. Yet their symbols remain. Their teachings endure. And in the soft glow of candles inside forgotten temples, or in the silent libraries of monastic orders, the memory of Atlantis' royal lineage has never truly vanished. It has only been waiting patiently, quietly, for those willing to seek it. Across the world's oldest myths, there is a shared whisper, an echo of a moment when the sky darkened, the oceans rose, and entire civilizations were swallowed whole. These stories, scattered across continents yet astonishingly similar, suggest that humanity once endured a cataclysm so immense that it reshaped not only the Earth, but the trajectory of human history itself. Mainstream archaeology often treats these tales as symbolic metaphors, but esoteric traditions, ancient priesthoods, and alternative historians argue that these myths cluster around a real event, a global disaster that obliterated an advanced culture and scattered its survivors. Among these ruins of memory lies the story of Atlantis and the royal lineage that foresaw the catastrophe long before it struck. The concept of a cyclical cataclysm has appeared for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time an age of greatness that ended in fire and flood. In India, texts such as the Mahabharata and the Vishnu Purana describe world ages ending in cosmic violence. The Hopi, Maya, and Inca traditions preserve memories of world cycles destroyed by the elements. Even the biblical flood is only one chapter in a global narrative repeated from Sumer to Scandinavia. Though these cultures were separated by geography and time, the consistency of their accounts suggests they were inheriting fragments of the same historical trauma. According to esoteric interpretation, this trauma was the fall of Atlantis. Modern science adds unexpected weight to these ancient claims. Geological evidence points to several dramatic environmental events that occurred around the end of the last ice age. One of the most widely discussed is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which proposes that fragments of a large comet struck the Earth approximately 12,800 years ago. This event would have triggered massive fires, sudden climate swings, and megafloods capable of wiping out entire regions. Some researchers argue that the resulting floods could have submerged coastal civilizations quickly enough to transform memory into myth. While the hypothesis remains controversial in mainstream circles, its alignment with ancient stories is hard to ignore. In esoteric traditions, the catastrophe was not unexpected. They claim the priest-kings of Atlantis possessed astronomical knowledge far beyond what is recognized today. According to these traditions, they tracked long-term celestial cycles, patterns of solar storms, cometary paths, and axial shifts, handed down over generations. Their temples, aligned precisely with stars and solstices, may have been observatories as much as spiritual centers. As the celestial signs grew ominous, the ruling priesthood interpreted them as warnings. Though they could not prevent the coming destruction, they could prepare. This belief, passed through Egyptian, Mayan, and Hermetic sources, suggests the existence of a cataclysm code, a body of knowledge used to anticipate era-ending disasters. Legends describe how, in the final generations before Atlantis' fall, its priesthood took extraordinary measures. According to these accounts, the royal archives were duplicated, coded, and hidden in multiple regions. Groups of navigators, artisans, and scholars were sent out in waves, instructed to establish sanctuaries far from the vulnerable coastlines. Ruins like Göbekli Tepe, mysterious even today, are seen by alternative researchers as one such sanctuary, a monumental project initiated by refugees who carried sacred knowledge with them. Mainstream archaeology dates the site to nearly the same period proposed for Atlantis destruction, adding to the intrigue. The dramatic environmental upheavals described in ancient myths align closely with the geological turmoil of the late Pleistocene. The melting of massive ice sheets, the sudden rise of sea levels by hundreds of feet, and mega tsunamis capable of obliterating coastlines. To the people witnessing these events, it would have appeared as though the world itself had turned hostile. Cities, temples, harbors, and fertile plains would have been lost beneath the rising ocean in a matter of days or weeks. It is no wonder, then, that so many cultures remembered a world that sank beneath the sea. In the context of Atlantis, the fall was more than a natural tragedy. Esoteric texts hint at internal corruption, spiritual decline, and moral decay among the ruling class. Plato's account echoes this theme, describing how the Atlantean kings, once noble and wise, grew hungry for conquest and power. Their spiritual connection to the divine weakened, and with it, their ability to maintain harmony. Some traditions even suggest that their misuse of sacred technologies or energy sources may have hastened their downfall. Whether literal or symbolic, these stories serve as a warning. A civilization could be destroyed not only by natural forces, but by its own hubris. Even as their world crumbled, the last Atlantean priesthood continued its final mission. Esoteric sources claim they activated a series of protocols, rituals, migrations, and encoded knowledge that later civilizations would inherit. These protocols weren't simply attempts to survive. They were carefully designed plans to preserve memory. Knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, writing, healing practices, and sacred geometry had to survive the flood. Genealogies of royal bloodlines had to be protected. Sacred objects, crystal devices, metal tablets, celestial diagrams were sealed in stone chambers or carried across oceans. These accounts describe a world frantically preparing for its end, guided by leaders who understood that the future of humanity depended on the survival of their teachings. Their efforts explain why complex knowledge appears suddenly in early civilizations after the cataclysm. Egypt, Sumer, and ancient India did not begin with crude settlements. They appeared with advanced architecture, mathematics, and astronomy seemingly prepackaged. Mainstream history calls this the Sumerian miracle or the Egyptian leap, but in esoteric tradition, these were no miracles. They were the legacy of Atlantis' final survivors. Even the biblical arc narrative, when viewed through a symbolic lens, reflects this idea, a vessel of knowledge preserved through disaster. While the literal details differ, the underlying story is identical across cultures. A chosen group preserves the essence of the old world so a new one can emerge. In this light, the cataclysm is not just an end but a hinge in human history. The old world dies, the new world begins, and between them stands a chain of survivors carrying the fire of civilization forward. Their knowledge becomes myth, their technologies become legend, and their royal lineage becomes the seed from which future dynasties grow. The Cataclysm Code represents the hidden layer beneath all these stories. It is the idea that an advanced civilization not only foresaw its end but prepared for it, leaving behind clues in the form of ancient calendars, stone alignments, mythic allegories, and encoded symbols. When modern researchers uncover anomalous ruins or decode ancient astronomical cycles, they may be touching fragments of that long-lost system. If Atlantis truly existed, then its fall was not simply a tragedy of geography. It was the pivotal moment that shaped the entire course of human civilization. And if the descendants of its royal lineage survived, then its legacy continues, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who can read the signs left in stone, myth, and star. For thousands of years, legends have circulated about a select group of survivors who escaped the destruction of a once great civilization and wandered across the world, carrying with them sacred knowledge, advanced skills, and the memory of a royal lineage destined never to fade. These stories appear in folk traditions, temple chronicles, oral histories, and cryptic inscriptions. From the Mediterranean to the Americas, from North Africa to the remote islands of the Atlantic. Each tradition describes mysterious strangers arriving after a flood or disaster, bringing with them the seeds of kingship, architecture, astronomy, and spiritual law. When viewed individually, these legends appear symbolic or mythic, but when woven together, they form a stunning mosaic that suggests a single origin, the diaspora of an elite class of Atlantean survivors whose bloodlines and wisdom shaped the early chapters of post-flood civilization. The Canary Islands, perched like broken fragments along the edge of the Atlantic, have long been suspected as remnants of a larger ancient landmass. The indigenous Guanche people who lived there before European contact preserved astonishing traditions that puzzled early explorers. They believed their ancestors came from a sunken land to the west. Their mummification practices resembled those of ancient Egypt. Their monumental stone constructions, though less refined, echoed techniques found in older Mediterranean cultures. Even their physical appearance, tall, often fair-haired and light-eyed, defied expectations for an isolated island population. Some researchers propose that the Guanches were descendants of Atlantean refugees who settled on the nearest high ground that remained above the waves after the deluge. Their legends speak of a noble class of leaders who maintained the old ways, guardians of a memory older than the islands themselves. To the east, in North Africa, Berber tribes hold equally compelling traditions. Several Berber clans claim descent from an ancient seafaring people who escaped a catastrophic flood. Their oral histories reference a vanished island empire and describe their ancestors as people of the sun, guided by priest-kings with knowledge of the stars. Berber symbols, such as the ancient sigils associated with royal lineages, have no clear origin within Africa. Their architecture, particularly the enigmatic stone towers and early megalithic structures, suggests deep ties to older Atlantic cultures. Some historians have even argued that the earliest dynasties of Egypt may have been influenced by or intermarried with these Berber lineages, transporting fragments of Atlantean memory across the desert into the Nile Valley. In the Mediterranean, one of the most famous claimants of lost ancestral memory was the island of Crete. The Minoans, with their advanced maritime technology, sophisticated architecture, and mysterious script, appears suddenly in the archaeological record as a fully formed civilization. Their palaces, especially at Knossos, contain labyrinthine layouts reminiscent of descriptions of Atlantean ceremonial centers. Their priests and rulers were portrayed as intermediaries between gods and humans, much like the divine-blooded kings of Plato's Atlantis. The Minoans worshipped a sea god and maintained complex astronomical cycles embedded in their rituals, aligning them with a tradition that may have preceded their own culture by thousands of years. Though mainstream historians attribute Minoan origins to the Aegean world, esoteric researchers propose the possibility that Minoan elites included descendants of Atlantean navigators who settled on Crete after leaving the sinking island. Farther west, in Iberia, several ancient tribes, particularly those in modern-day Andalusia and Portugal, preserved legends of divine kings arriving by sea. Some medieval chroniclers recorded accounts of a mysterious people, described as white-clad strangers, who taught the early inhabitants metalworking, navigation, and sacred geometry. The Tartessian civilization, centered in southwestern Iberia, rose rapidly to prominence and just as quickly faded. Their sudden sophistication, advanced metallurgy, and the layout of their settlements have led some to speculate that Tartessos was either a colony of Atlantis or a settlement founded by its refugees. The legend of a wealthy coastal kingdom destroyed by the sea resonates eerily with Plato's account and may reflect a fragmented memory of Atlantean migrants integrating with native Iberian peoples. Crossing the Atlantic, the parallels become even more striking. In Mesoamerica, nearly every major civilization, from the Olmec to the Maya to the Aztec, spoke of a group of bearded foreigners who arrived from the east across the ocean. These visitors were described as tall, light-skinned, wise, and possessing extraordinary knowledge of writing, mathematics, agriculture, and celestial cycles. Among them, the most famous figure is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity, who in some traditions is described as an actual historical ruler. He was said to have come from a land that was destroyed by the sea. The Maya similarly revered Kukulkan, another civilizing figure traced to an eastern homeland. These myths describe not a single man, but a group, a class of foreign nobles or priests who established city-states, built great temples, and taught people how to read the stars. Many alternative historians interpret these accounts as evidence of Atlantean survivors arriving in the Americas and forming the intellectual backbone of early Mesoamerican civilizations. In South America, the legends are even more explicit. The Incas spoke of Viracocha, a tall, fair-skinned, bearded teacher who emerged after a devastating flood and restored knowledge to a traumatized world. He was accompanied by a group of assistants, described as wise men or architects, who helped organize society and build monumental structures. Andean myths hold that these beings eventually departed across the ocean, promising to return in a future age. The similarities between Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl, and other Eastern gods have long intrigued scholars. The sudden appearance of advanced stoneworking techniques, such as perfect polygonal masonry, suggests the influence of a highly skilled culture with deep architectural knowledge. For some researchers, these cultural explosions are the fingerprints of royal Atlantean lineages establishing new centers of civilization far from the drowned homeland. Across the Atlantic, on islands such as the Azores, Madeira, and even parts of the Caribbean, local stories speak of mysterious ancient visitors who arrived after a great oceanic catastrophe. Many islands contain submerged structures or unexplained stone formations that resemble early Atlantean architectural styles. The Azores in particular, located near the mid-Atlantic ridge, are often proposed as stepping stones or remnant peaks of the former Atlantean landmass. In some esoteric traditions, the Azores were once the refuge of the last Atlantean kings before even these islands were partially swallowed by the shifting ocean. Even in northern Europe, traditions persist. The Druids of the British Isles believe their priestly order descended from an earlier race of divine kings who came from a vanished western land. Ancient Irish manuscripts reference the Tuatha De Danann, a mysterious, highly skilled people who arrived by sea in dark clouds and brought with them remarkable abilities, healing, metallurgy, and potent magical knowledge. Some esoteric writers see the Tuatha not as mythical beings, but as a poetic memory of Atlantean refugees establishing themselves in the highlands of Ireland and Scotland. When these scattered accounts are viewed not as isolated myths, but as remnants of a shared historical reality, a striking pattern emerges. After the destruction of their homeland, the Atlantean elite dispersed widely, some settling on nearby islands, others integrating into North African and Mediterranean cultures, while still others sailed westward into the Americas. Their arrival ignited sudden advancements in human society, the rise of kingship, the birth of monumental architecture, the introduction of complex calendars, the worship of sky gods, and the appearance of sacred symbols consistent across continents. It is as though a network of royal survivors spread across the world like living seeds, each carrying fragments of memory, ritual, and knowledge. Their presence, often subtle, altered the course of entire civilizations. Over generations, their lineage mingled with local populations, but their influence persisted in the institutions they formed: priesthoods, dynasties, astronomical schools, and mystery orders that claimed descent from an earlier, forgotten age. Whether these diaspora stories represent literal migrations or mythic echoes of cultural transformation, they reveal a deeper truth. Humanity carries within its collective memory the shadow of a lost world, and the survivors of that world, whether flesh and blood or symbolic archetypes, continue to shape our legends, institutions, and mysteries. The royal heirs of Atlantis may not have preserved their empire, but they may have preserved something far more enduring, the blueprint for civilization itself. Throughout human history, mysterious artifacts have surfaced in the most unexpected places, objects that defy conventional explanation and hint at a distant, forgotten age of mastery. Some are forged of metals whose origins remain unclear. Others bear symbols not linked to any known alphabet. Still others are carved with such precision that modern tools struggle to replicate them. While mainstream scholars often label these items as anomalies, outliers, or misinterpretations, an alternative view suggests they may be relics of a vanished civilization whose royal class carried their treasures across oceans as their homeland sank beneath the waves. These artifacts, scattered like breadcrumbs across continents, may be the last physical remnants of the Atlantean sovereigns, their heirlooms, ceremonial objects, and technological remnants preserved by fate rather than time. One of the most compelling categories of such artifacts is the mysterious metal known as orichalcum. Described vividly by Plato, orichalcum was said to be the second most valuable metal in Atlantis, surpassed only by gold. It gleamed with a reddish hue, like fire captured in metal form, and was used to adorn the walls of temples and palaces, especially in the sanctuary of Poseidon. For centuries, orichalcum was dismissed as a poetic invention, until a shipwreck off the coast of Sicily yielded dozens of ingots matching ancient descriptions. These ingots were unlike typical bronze or brass alloys. Their composition was unusual, their color striking, and their manufacturing techniques difficult to classify within known ancient metallurgy. While experts cautiously labeled them as a unique copper-zinc alloy, some researchers suggested a more intriguing possibility. These ingots may represent a late survival of Atlantean metallurgical knowledge, transported across the Mediterranean by refugees and preserved in trade networks long after their homeland sank. Other metallic artifacts raise similar questions. Bronze discs with unidentifiable symbols, found in southern Iberia and North Africa, defy classification. Their markings resemble neither Phoenician nor Egyptian writing, nor any known proto-script. Some discs contain geometric spirals identical to motifs found in the Americas, while others show trident-like shapes associated with Atlantean iconography. The uniform spacing and mathematical ratios encoded in these symbols imply a highly structured language, possibly a priestly script reserved for ritual or royal purposes. The fact that these discs often appear in coastal regions adds weight to the idea that they originated from sea-based peoples with sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Stone artifacts also play a critical role in this web of mystery. In multiple regions once connected to seafaring civilizations, such as the Canary Islands, Crete, Sardinia, the Azores, and the Caribbean, researchers have uncovered stone spheres, pillars, and altars with astonishing precision. Many of these stones are aligned with solstices or equinoxes, mirroring the astronomical concerns of ancient priest-kings. Some contain cup marks arranged in constellational patterns. Others display impossible smoothness or right angles, suggesting cutting techniques unknown to conventional Bronze Age cultures. Local legends in these regions often speak of stone lords or sky teachers who carved such objects in the age after the Great Flood, further fueling speculation about an Atlantean origin. Even more perplexing are the crystal artifacts. In various parts of the world, particularly Central America, South America, the Mediterranean, and certain Atlantic islands, researchers have uncovered carved quartz objects of exceptional craftsmanship. Some are crystal skulls, others crystalline spheres, rods, and tablets. A few contain microscopic etchings, refractive tunnels, or optical properties that appear engineered rather than accidental. Esoteric traditions describe the Atlanteans as masters of crystalline technology, using stones for energy amplification, communication, and even ceremonial rites of kingship. In this view, crystal thrones, crystal diadems, and crystal tablets were not just symbolic objects, but functional tools. The fact that crystal artifacts appear suddenly and sporadically in regions associated with ancient flood myths is often interpreted as evidence that refugees carried them as prized possessions of their noble houses. Then there are the inexplicable mechanisms, objects that seem out of place for their archaeological context. One of the most famous is the Antikythera mechanism, discovered off a Greek island. While it is not claimed to be Atlantean by mainstream scholars, some alternative researchers consider it part of a wider set of anomalous devices indicating a forgotten technological lineage. The mechanism's complexity suggests an understanding of gears, astronomy, and mathematics far beyond the period in which it was supposedly created. Similar gear fragments and precision-cut metal pieces, though less famous, have been found in underwater contexts from Sicily to the coast of Portugal. Some believe these devices may have descended from a much older tradition preserved by seafaring elites, potentially those who fled Atlantis carrying remnants of their technological heritage. The New World also offers its share of perplexing artifacts. In Mexico, carved stele depict figures using objects that resemble measuring tools, compasses, and devices far more advanced than their surrounding culture. The Olmec colossal heads, massive stone sculptures with astonishing precision, bear symbols and adornments that some interpret as foreign or even oceanic in origin. In the Andes, intricate gold artifacts depict beings with elongated heads, radiant crowns, or trident symbols. Though these could be symbolic motifs, their consistency across continents raises questions about a shared source of artistic influence. Some Andean artifacts contain alloys that require high temperatures to produce, temperatures that should not have been possible with the known technologies of the time. Perhaps most tantalizing are the encoded texts, inscriptions that resemble known language. The Phaistos disk of Crete remains undeciphered, its symbols unlike any other script in the ancient world. Some glyphs resemble sea creatures, others royal insignia, still others celestial symbols. Its spiraling structure has led some to propose it as a kind of cosmic calendar or ritual object, consistent with Atlantean traditions of royal astronomer priests. Similarly, scripts found in the Canary Islands, the Azores, and even coastal Brazil share strange similarities despite their geographic separation. These connections suggest that the survivors of a once unified culture may have carried their writing across oceans and continents before it fragmented into countless regional variants. Underwater archaeology adds yet another layer to this puzzle. Off the coasts of Bimini, Japan, Malta, and India, divers have discovered submerged structures, steps, walkways, platforms, and blocks that appear artificially arranged. While some may be natural formations, others bear tool marks or patterns indicating human involvement. Across the ancient world, long before empires rose and fell, stories emerged of powerful rulers who traveled not merely by land, but across vast oceans, guided by knowledge that their surrounding cultures could barely comprehend. These legends describe figures who appeared suddenly on foreign shores, bringing with them advanced teachings, royal insignia, and a bearing that set them apart from the native populations. Some accounts portray them as divine messengers, others as exiled kings, and still others as survivors of a distant catastrophe. Many of these traditions share a striking similarity. The mysterious visitors arrived from the West, from a place associated with a vanished island or sunken kingdom. Scholars have often dismissed these stories as mythology, but their recurring themes suggest that they may preserve a faint cultural memory of Atlantean sovereigns who escaped the destruction of their homeland and spread their knowledge across the world. One of the most widely recognized figures in these traditions is the bearded, robed teacher who arrives from the sea, bringing wisdom in agriculture, astronomy, architecture, and governance. In Mesoamerican lore, this figure is known as Quetzalcoatl, a serene, civilizing presence who opposes blood sacrifice, teaches calendar systems, and constructs monumental structures with an otherworldly understanding of geometry. Legends describe him as light-skinned, tall, and bearing foreign vestments, unlike the native populations. He arrives by boat from the east, rules with gentleness, then departs across the sea with a promise to return. While conventional interpretations frame Quetzalcoatl as a myth or deity, others believe he may represent a historical king or priest from Atlantis, bringing remnants of his destroyed civilization to a new world. In South America, a strikingly similar figure emerges, Viracocha, the great teacher of the Andes. He appears after a cataclysmic flood, walking the earth to restore order and teach stoneworking, agriculture, medicine, and social structure. Like Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha is described as bearded, tall, and foreign. He carries a staff or scepter associated with kingship. His first disciples become the founders of Andean dynasties, and his teachings form the backbone of Inca religious order. Local legend insists that Viracocha came from the west, from across the ocean, precisely the region traditionally associated with the destruction of Atlantis. The similarities between these figures, separated by thousands of miles, imply a shared origin or cultural memory of a single group of survivors who traveled far and wide after their world collapsed. Turning to the Mediterranean, ancient Greece offers the figure of Danaus, the seafaring king who escapes a disaster in the west and leads his people to a new homeland. Some traditions portray the Danans as foreigners who brought advanced maritime skills and cosmological knowledge to Greece. Their arrival aligns with a period of sudden cultural transformation, as if new ideas and techniques had been injected into the region. Similar stories surround Cadmus, who introduces writing to Greece, and the mysterious sea peoples, whose origins remain uncertain, yet whose movements coincide with dramatic disruptions across the Mediterranean. Several alternative historians interpret these population shifts as migrations of Atlantean nobles who carried fragments of their culture with them. Egyptian lore also contains hints of such arrivals. The ancient texts reference the followers of Horus, a group of godlike rulers who appear after a great flood and establish the earliest dynasties of Egypt. They possessed knowledge of mathematics, architecture, and celestial cycles, enabling them to construct temples and align structures with astronomical precision. Later traditions describe Osiris as a traveling king who brought civilization to foreign lands before returning to govern Egypt. These accounts reflect the same archetype found elsewhere, a dignified ruler from a distant place bringing advanced wisdom after a cataclysmic event. In the Middle East, the figure of Oannes emerges from Babylonian tradition. Oannes is described not as a mythic monster, but as a wise being who emerges from the sea to teach writing, law, agriculture, and the sciences. Although depicted symbolically with fish-like elements, older interpretations suggest he may represent a foreign teacher skilled in navigation and maritime survival. Ancient writers, such as Berossus, insist that Oannes taught lessons far superior to contemporary knowledge, raising the possibility that he embodied teachings carried by survivors of a lost, oceanic culture. These stories are accompanied by another striking pattern: the establishment of royal bloodlines said to descend from these mysterious visitors. In the Andes, Inca rulers claim divine ancestry from Viracocha. In Mesoamerica, lineage is traced to Quetzalcoatl. In Egypt, pharaohs are described as inheritors of the divine kingship of Osiris and Horus. Many Mediterranean dynasties claim descent from seafaring founders whose origins were older than recorded history. These genealogies often involve symbols associated with Atlantis: tridents, solar crowns, serpents, or shining stones. Some include references to advanced calendars, star knowledge, or sacred geometry that appears unexpectedly sophisticated for the cultures in which it took root. If these rulers were, in fact, descendants of Atlantis, their expansion into new regions would not merely represent migration, but the deliberate preservation of royal authority and cultural identity. After losing their homeland, they may have sought to rebuild pieces of their civilization in new territories. Their knowledge, encoded in myths, ceremonies, and monumental architecture, would become the seed for which later cultures grew. The sudden appearance of complex agricultural systems, precisely aligned structures, and standardized legal frameworks in various ancient societies could point to the deliberate intervention of refugee elites whose memories stretched back to an age of greater advancement. In many traditions, these rulers carry with them sacred objects or symbols of power that link them to their lost homeland. Some narratives describe shining tablets, crystal staffs, metal plates engraved with forgotten scripts, and crowns embedded with luminous stones. These objects are often treated as relics of divine origin and are passed down through generations of rulers. The similarity of these motifs across different continents suggests not coincidence, but the remnants of a shared royal tradition rooted in a vanished civilization. Another detail that appears consistently is the emphasis on rebuilding after catastrophe. The visitors arrive after floods, earthquakes, or dramatic celestial events. They teach survivors how to restore their lands, measure time, and predict natural cycles. These acts resonate strongly with the memory of Atlantis, said to have been destroyed by violent earth changes. Survivors who escaped such a disaster would naturally focus on helping new communities avoid the same fate. Their teachings in astronomy, agriculture, and architecture may have been attempts to preserve the knowledge that once sustained their own society. Finally, the global distribution of these traditions hints at widespread voyages undertaken by the survivors. If Atlantean nobles scattered across the world, their descendants would be found in multiple regions, each carrying fragments of their original culture. Over generations, these fragments evolved into localized myths. Yet beneath the cultural differences, the core themes remain constant. Rulers who come from the sea, possessing advanced knowledge, a history rooted in catastrophe, symbolic artifacts tied to an ancestral homeland, and dynastic lines claiming descent from foreign, godlike ancestors. Viewed in this light, the legends of ancient rulers across the world may not be imaginary or loosely connected. They may form a global memory map of the final journeys taken by Atlantean sovereigns as they sought refuge after their homeland sank beneath the waves. The consistent appearance of these figures, their shared traits, and their profound impact on early civilizations collectively suggest that they were not fictional deities, but real individuals whose origins lay in an older, highly advanced culture that once thrived and was ultimately lost in the distant Atlantic. Far beneath the restless surface of the Atlantic, where light fades into drifting shadows and ancient mountains lie drowned under miles of water, there are structures, silent, geometric, and unmistakably artificial, waiting in darkness. These formations, captured only in fleeting sonar sweeps and ROV glimpses, appear to belong to no known civilization and no known era. To some researchers, these underwater ruins may represent a lost city. To others, they are simply anomalies carved by nature. But to those who study the deeper patterns, myths, migrations, and ancient catastrophes, they hint at something far more profound, a hidden sanctuary that may once have been the heart of Atlantis, the royal quarter where its sovereign line preserved the knowledge, power, and sacred responsibilities of the old world. When explorers first began mapping the ocean floor in detail during the mid-20th century, They expected to find little more than volcanic ridges, sediment plains, and underwater canyons. Instead, they found sudden, symmetrical forms rising from the abyss. On some maps, these shapes resembled plazas or boulevard-like arrangements. In others, they formed polygonal patterns with angles too precise to attribute to chance. Most were dismissed as data glitches, noise from outdated sonar, or misreadings caused by geological folds. But not all anomalies vanished under closer inspection. A select few persisted through multiple surveys, reappearing in scans decades apart, as if reminding humanity that a forgotten story still waited to be uncovered. These recurring anomalies lie primarily in regions that coincide uncannily with ancient descriptions of Atlantis' location. West of the Pillars of Heracles, near fracture zones and volcanic plateaus that could easily conceal a sunken landmass. The most frequently cited area is a vast plateau interrupted by steep drop-offs, an environment consistent with the remnants of a large island that once existed above sea level. In this submerged landscape, researchers found linear ridges arranged in parallel orientations, circular depressions with perfect radial symmetry, and enormous blocks that appear to be stacked atop each other, like the foundations of colossal buildings. Some of these blocks are aligned along compass directions that mirror sacred orientations used by ancient cultures worldwide. To imagine this region as the site of Atlantis' royal quarter, one must first revisit the descriptions preserved in old texts. Plato described an inner sanctuary, a place of unrivaled beauty and engineering, surrounded by concentric rings of water and land. At its center stood the royal palace of the 10 kings, adorned with precious metals, gleaming stones, and a temple dedicated to Poseidon. The walls shone with orichalcum. The floors were crafted from white, red, and black stone. Gardens flourished beneath the sun, and canals flowed like arteries through the city, connecting its heart to the sea. If any fragment of that city survived the cataclysm, it would logically be the deepest foundations of the royal district, protected not by choice, but by the immutable workings of geology. Now imagine those grand temples and palaces, not towering in sunlight, but lying shattered and silent beneath crushing pressure. Their once radiant walls would be encrusted with billions of years of sediment. Their canals would have collapsed into winding channels, now home to unseen marine life. Their plazas, once filled with music, ritual, and ceremony, would be buried beneath silt, fragmented beyond recognition. Yet even broken fragments can speak. Even ruined geometry can tell a story. And the anomalies found on the ocean floor tell a story of unnatural order, of design, planning, and deliberate construction. Some deep-sea engineers who have seen classified sonar imaging claim that certain structures appear to be composed of stone blocks with perfectly straight edges spanning dozens of meters. Natural rock seldom forms such lines at depths where tectonic activity is violent and constant. Other whistleblowers describe vast rectangular voids, cavern-like spaces beneath the seafloor, that could only form if earlier structures had collapsed or been hollowed out intentionally. Such spaces may once have housed archives, energy chambers, or ceremonial halls of the Atlantean elite. There are also reports, though less verifiable, of artifacts retrieved from these depths during private expeditions. These whispers speak of metallic fragments of unknown composition, of translucent materials similar to advanced glass, and of symbolic engravings that resemble no known script. Whether these tales are genuine discoveries or simply imaginative attempts to fill the void left by limited data, they highlight how eagerly researchers seek any clue that could transform speculation into historical reality. More intriguing still are the magnetometric anomalies. Across several points near the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, instruments detect powerful electromagnetic distortions that behave unlike typical geological signatures. Some are steady, as if emanating from buried structures with unusual mineral content. Others pulse faintly, as though responding to tidal shifts. A few researchers have proposed that these readings might be remnants of ancient energy systems, devices or conduits that once powered the Atlantean capital. According to esoteric traditions, Atlantis was not simply a kingdom, but a technological marvel that integrated natural forces with engineered architecture. If these legends hold even a grain of truth, then the sanctuary at its center may have been a hub of such technology, now sleeping beneath the ocean floor. But the question that haunts every explorer is this: if such a sanctuary truly exists, why has it not been openly acknowledged or excavated? The answer lies in a mixture of scientific caution, political tension, and the vast difficulty of deep-sea exploration. The depths at which these structures lie are inhospitable to conventional diving equipment. Even advanced submersibles must contend with crushing pressure, poor visibility, and the risk of structural failure. Conducting thorough surveys is expensive and requires international cooperation, something not easily achieved in a world where oceanic claims are politically sensitive. Moreover, institutions often hesitate to validate discoveries that challenge established narratives. If a sunken city predating all known civilizations were found in the Atlantic, it would fundamentally rewrite human history. It would imply that memory of a global maritime culture survived only through myths and legends. It would raise unsettling questions about what other knowledge might have been lost, and what other ruins might still be hidden beneath the sea. For these reasons, some believe that certain findings have been quietly classified, their details withheld to avoid disrupting academic and geopolitical stability. Despite these barriers, hints continue to emerge. High-resolution mapping systems used by private ocean mining companies have accidentally captured images of step-like terraces and pyramidal shapes. Naval operations have encountered symmetrical sonar reflections that do not match any known geological formations. Independent researchers analyzing. For thousands of years, humanity has lived with the quiet sense that something is missing from our understanding of the past. A piece of the puzzle that, once restored, might change the trajectory of how we interpret civilization, power, and the origins of knowledge itself. The possibility that Atlantis not only existed, but maintained a highly structured royal lineage with advanced understanding, forces us to consider that the human story is not a steady upward climb, but a cycle of rises, falls, and rediscoveries. When seen through this lens, the legacy of the Atlantean kings becomes more than a myth. It becomes a key to interpreting our deepest ancestral memories and the cultural markers that echo across continents, long after the kingdom that birthed them sank beneath the waves. If the Atlantean royal legacy is indeed real, its implications ripple across nearly every field of history and archaeology. First, it challenges the conventional idea that complex civilization began in a single location and then slowly radiated outward. Instead, it suggests that pockets of high knowledge existed far earlier than mainstream timelines allow. That long before Sumer, Egypt, or the Indus Valley came into being, there was already a structured, technologically adept society thriving on an island capital. This would mean that the architectural and astronomical abilities seen in later civilizations were not inventions of those cultures, but inherited fragments of a much older world carried by survivors who scattered across the globe. Consider the recurring themes of kingship that appear independently across ancient societies. Many cultures describe a sacred order in which rulers are not just political leaders, but custodians of cosmic balance. They carry symbols of power that resemble those described in Atlantean myths: scepters, diadems, shining metals, mathematically oriented crowns. These similarities become easier to explain if all these systems were seeded by exiles who preserved the ceremonial traditions and knowledge systems of a more ancient royal house. The pharaonic rituals of Egypt, the divine kingship of Mesopotamia, the priest kings of Mesoamerica, and the sage rulers of India may all reflect distant memories of Atlantean governance, a structure in which leadership was a blend of knowledge, stewardship, spiritual alignment, and societal organization. If such a lineage once existed, then the disappearance of Atlantis may have forced its members into a role far more significant than they ever anticipated. Rather than ruling a singular empire, they became the catalyst for multiple civilizations across the world, teaching astronomy, agriculture, geometry, and timekeeping wherever they settled. This reframes history as a process not of independent invention, but of restoration. Humanity, after a near-total collapse, was guided back towards structure and order by individuals whose memories kept alive the last sparks of a fallen golden age. This also changes how we interpret myths. For generations, scholars have treated flood stories, accounts of sky disks, sunken cities, and sea-born kings as symbolic allegories, metaphors for natural forces or moral lessons. But when these myths align so closely in regions separated by oceans, and when they all echo the destruction of a powerful island civilization, it becomes difficult to dismiss them. Instead, they begin to look like cultural preservation, a way for traumatized survivors to encode the memory of their lost homeland into their new societies. The stories of fire and water descending from the sky, of the earth trembling, of cities swallowed by the sea, suddenly carry the weight of historical testimony rather than imaginative fiction. There are also deeper implications for how we understand human capability. If an earlier civilization had achieved high levels of engineering, astronomy, or even energy manipulation, then it raises the possibility that humanity is not progressing toward knowledge, but reclaiming it. Technologies that seem cutting-edge today, geospatial mapping, advanced metallurgy, or the harnessing of natural energy fields, might have ancient precedents long erased by time. The precision of megalithic structures, the alignment of temples with celestial bodies, and the sudden appearance of advanced agricultural systems may no longer be mysteries. They may instead be echoes of the Atlantean king's instruction, transmitted through their descendants to the societies they helped build. But perhaps the most profound implication lies in the understanding of power itself. If the royal households of Atlantis maintained sacred knowledge of Earth cycles, cosmic alignments, energy pathways, or even the fragility of human civilization, then their collapse serves as a cautionary tale. A civilization that reached great heights fell not because of external conquest, but because it misaligned itself with the natural forces it once understood. Many traditions warned that Atlantis fell due to imbalance, misuse of power, spiritual corruption, or a failure to uphold the harmony that once stabilized their society. This is a pattern seen across history. When civilizations rise too quickly, detached from the wisdom that birthed them, they become vulnerable. Thus, the legacy of the Atlantean kings is not simply one of lost technology or vanished wealth, but of lessons written into the fabric of human myth. The survivors who traveled to new lands did not spread knowledge alone. They spread warnings. Their teachings about celestial cycles, natural rhythms, and the fragile equilibrium between humanity and nature may have been attempts to prevent future societies from repeating the same catastrophic errors. Understanding this legacy also casts new light on why certain traditions were guarded so fiercely by mystery schools, priesthoods, and secret societies. If these groups inherited fragments of Atlantean wisdom, astronomic principles, sacred geometry, or esoteric knowledge of natural energy, they may have sought to protect it from misuse. Over generations, this knowledge became codified in rituals, symbols, and coded texts. Some of it emerged in architecture, some in religious iconography, some in royal ceremonies. There's a certain silence that exists only in the depths of the ocean, a silence that feels alive, as if it holds memories older than the continents themselves. In that silence, humanity senses something calling from beneath the waves, not in words or sounds, but in intuition, in dreams, in the strange familiarity of myths that appear in every culture despite oceans that should have separated those stories forever. As the modern world pushes forward with ceaseless speed, there is a growing feeling that the past has not yet finished speaking, and that the ocean still guards secrets that are slowly, inevitably, rising back into human awareness. For centuries, the story of Atlantis lived on the edge of imagination, resurfacing at moments when humanity seemed ready to examine itself more deeply. In every era of discovery, explorers, philosophers, mystics, and scholars return to the idea that a forgotten chapter of human civilization lay beneath the sea. Perhaps they were responding to a collective memory, something inherited, something ancient, that whispered to them that the world they knew was only part of the truth. And now, with technology advancing at a pace that was unimaginable even a century ago, the ocean is beginning to reveal its long-kept secrets with a clarity that earlier generations could not access. Remote-operated vehicles, deep-sea sonar, high-resolution mapping, and satellite bathymetry have begun showing patterns that do not belong to nature alone. Straight lines, right angles, terraces, platforms, and shapes that resemble foundations. Each discovery adds a fragment to a puzzle that our ancestors tried to preserve through legend. These structures do not confirm Atlantis, but they confirm something equally important, that the ocean has not been fully explored, and that vast portions of human history remain submerged, waiting for the right moment to emerge. If the ocean is indeed slowly giving back what it once took, then humanity stands at the threshold of rediscovering a legacy that has shaped it for millennia without ever being fully understood. And perhaps that is what the deep memory truly means, not simply the recovery of lost ruins or ancient texts, but the recovery of a state of awareness that once guided our ancestors. A state in which mythology and history were not separate, in which science and spirituality were intertwined, and in which humans saw themselves as stewards of the world rather than its conquerors. This returning memory is not loud. It does not demand attention. Instead, it settles gently into the collective consciousness, influencing dreams, inspiring curiosity, and encouraging a reevaluation of the stories we have been told. People across the world feel drawn to ancient mysteries, sacred structures, forgotten cultures, and symbols that seem to resonate at a level deeper than logic. That resonance may be the faint echo of Atlantean knowledge, flickering like a distant star through layers of time. It is possible that the royal legacy of Atlantis was never truly lost, but merely hidden, encoded within the world's myths, preserved through bloodlines, safeguarded by mystery schools, and embedded in architecture that points upward to the heavens and downward into the earth's sacred geometry. If this is true, then the return of the deep memory is not a new phenomenon, but the continuation of an ancient cycle. Just as the survivors of Atlantis carried fragments of their world into the civilizations they helped shape, those fragments continue to surface in each generation of seekers, researchers, and visionaries who sense that humanity's story is far older and far more extraordinary than the textbooks admit. The implications of remembering this legacy stretch beyond archaeology or mythology. They touch on the ethical and spiritual trajectory of the modern world. The Atlanteans, according to the oldest accounts, reached their height through wisdom, balance, and an advanced understanding of natural forces. But they fell, not because of ignorance, but because they lost harmony with those same forces. Their rise and fall form a cycle that humanity seems fated to repeat, unless we learn from the shadows cast across time. In many ways, the modern world stands at a crossroads similar to the one Atlantis faced. Technological advancements accelerate every year, yet the sense of inner balance grows thinner. The relationship between humanity and the natural world becomes more strained. Power is pursued without reflection, and knowledge is accumulated without wisdom. These patterns mirror the warnings embedded in Atlantean myths, that a civilization without spiritual grounding endangers itself, no matter how advanced its tools. The return of the deep memory may be a call to slow down, to listen, to recalibrate. It may be a reminder that knowledge without humility leads to imbalance, and that the greatest civilizations are not defined solely by their achievements, but by their alignment with principles that transcend cycles of time. If the kings of Atlantis truly carried a sacred mandate, a responsibility to uphold cosmic balance, then their lost wisdom may be resurfacing precisely when the world needs it again. But this return is not dramatic. It unfolds gently like a tide. It can be seen in the growing fascination with ancient cultures, the revival of interest in sacred geometry, the increasing awareness of earth energies, the rediscovery of indigenous wisdom, and the global desire for reconnection with something deeper than material progress. These are not coincidences. They are signs of a collective awakening, a subtle shift toward remembering what humanity once understood instinctively. The most powerful element of this awakening is not the discovery of ruins or artifacts, but the rediscovery of perspective. When people begin to see themselves not as isolated beings, but as inheritors of a vast, cyclical history, one marked by rises, collapses, and rebirths, they gain humility, they gain curiosity, and they gain a sense of responsibility toward the future. The story of Atlantis becomes a guide, a caution, and a source of inspiration all at once.